Yes, my name is Foster, aka AutoPilot. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, raised in Muskegon, Michigan, and I've been a part of the Grand Rapids community for about 16, 17 years now. I got to Grand Rapids about 2006, 2007. For a while, I was living in Granville, and that was wild in itself, getting pulled over all the time for being Black in Granville. And I worked downtown in Grand Rapids I worked at the Amway Grand, and then I worked at Gardella's. And then once I worked in Gardella's, I got to meet the entertainment world, right? Nightlife. Um, in doing so, I met one of my buddies. His name is Roger Wardell. People call him Chip. And we formed the hip hop group Gray Theory. Uh, we used to do a lot of open mics. One of the open mics we did was at Billy's Lounge. So hip hop was like my forefront into like Grand Rapids entertainment and nightlife. And then I met ZZ Jasper. And when I met him, he was hosting the East Town Hookah Lounge. And, a friendship blossomed there. And he asked me, have I ever written an actual poem? And I was like, yo, man, I wrote when I was a kid and everything, but it was nothing that I would send out or say that I was proud of. I would do it just to do it. And then when I was actually confronted with the challenge of writing a poem, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that what a former teacher, his name was Robert Gibner, he told me that writing could take me anywhere that I wanted to go. And sure enough, it has. It has opened up many doors and opportunities for me. Whether musically or through poetry, but also nightlife, man. There's something about like being able to give somebody a smile and entertain them that always transfers throughout life. You can always take an old memory of somebody making you smile, and it's just something you can always carry with you. So yeah, since about 2008, 2009, performing at the East Town Hookah Lounge, and that turned into a collaborative of artists creating the Diatribe. We did the first blind, deaf friendly art prize exhibit, and we hit a lot of stages and mics and the street, and nobody ever told me the huge education component of Art Prize. What I found out was that there were so many educators coming to Art Prize, and a lot of people came to see the live performances of poetry, and we had closed caption, we had Braille, we had sign language interpreters. We had all these things that made sure that a group of individuals were not left out to hear these words that we all had and to learn who we were. I remember one of the slogans that we had that made recoil. It said, if we don't win Art Prize, we're going to riot. And we didn't riot. We didn't win either. But that one always stood out to me because, like, it was amazing, these gentlemen that I got to create this life with, right? This particular time period. And it was a wild ride in 2013, and to work as many jobs as I did at the time and to still find time to perform every single day. It was absolutely amazing. It's one of those things that will always live with me. We created so much, and then I created the Drunken Retort in 2013. I also created the original Back to the '90s party in 2013, and I had all these things that were entertainment and edutainment as well, and it helped me be the person that I am today. Oh man, the Drunken Retort was a wild ass show. I'm so happy that I was able to build that with my friends. It helped Fable and I. Like, Fable is one of my best friends. Gleason is one of my best friends. Like we're still the three amigos. I still love everybody that had a hand in the Diatribe. Like I still, talk and text everybody from the Diatribe, right? So the original group was Stephen Grin, Azizi Jasper, Mitch Burns, Vincent Dix, Duke Green, Marcel, Fable Price, and myself. And we had a show at the Bob, right? So we did the Easttown Hookah Lounge on Wednesdays. And then we had the Drunken Retort on Mondays. And then we had the Message on Tuesdays. So there was multiple times throughout the week that you can go and catch poetry, right? And what came about was the Drunken Retort. We wanted a wild show. We wanted raunchiness. We wanted people to get loud for poetry because like all the other shows were kind of quiet and, very respectable. And we wanted to flip the world on its head. We also wanted to be inclusive, man. It was a learning experience. Gleason, definitely a part of the LGBTQ community. There was Lauren Ogle, definitely a part of the LGBTQ community as a bartender. And you have these friends, and then you create these other elements that you never knew you needed in your life, right? You always need a difference of opinion. You don't want the same people telling you the same story or the same things, because then you'll be in the same bubble, and you don't want to be in the same bubble, right? There's so many other attributes of Earth that you need to experience, and that's what the Drunken Retort was. It was an experience. It was an amalgamation of everybody that need to be brought together at some point in time. And what came from that was absolutely beautiful. That show, we had our 4 rules. We had beverages. You had Black people, you had white people, you had Asian people, you had everybody, Hispanic artists, and that it was so much diversity and necessity in one room, right? It was once referred to as a tiny closet, and that tiny closet brought a lot of artists through its doors. In the 7 years of having the Drunken Retort, I think I missed maybe like 6 shows. In 7 years, right? And it was wild. Fable got to go on tour, and I held the show down with Gleason. I've made sure that you gonna be all right, man. Go pursue these dreams, man. It's like I got to take this dude out of the state for his first chance to leave Michigan. And we went to the Green Mill in Chicago, and then this dude won the slam, and I was like, "Yo, man, this was like my little brother right here, man." And sometimes he's the bigger brother, just because that's how the dynamic of our friendship. Like we constantly learn and feed off of each other. And same thing with Gleason. Like I call Gleason Thunkle. It's like they and Uncle. Together, and we came up with that name, and like our the relationship that we have and friendship is just, I don't know where I would be without it. And then the Drunken Retort, man, I can't wait to have that energy back, right? A lot of us have thought about just like switching the name to the Retort, and that was a suggestion that Azizi made a long time ago. He's like, "Yo, you guys should just call it the Retort, man, because a lot of people don't drink." And I was like, "Yo, we'll just call it the Drunken Retort because you can be drunk on anything, right?" And then now that I'm older, I was just like, "Oh, the Retort still carries, right?" Because a lot of people still say, "Oh man, you ever go check out the Retort?" And like it's mentioned among great names throughout this country for an open mic. And man, it's just something to be proud of, to constantly remember, and it needs to be resurrected. And I can't wait to have a hand in doing so. Oh man. So man, we haven't even had the show in 2 years. Thanks a lot, COVID. So it was the yell rule. It was the boo bell rule, the swell rule, and then the tail rule. Yeah, I think Fable he said them wrong the other day out of the order, but it was yell, bell, tail, or swell rule, and then tail rule.
Can you describe those?
Oh man, so Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Stella's Lounge is proud to present the Drunken Retort. And the first rule was the yell rule. And if you like something, yell, get loud for poetry. A lot of times you think it messes up the artist, and it doesn't, right? It's the energy that you give is the energy that you're gonna get. So if you get loud for poetry, that artist is gonna get loud for you and share themselves. And then the boo bell rule, right? If somebody got 3 bells, we would yell, "Get the fuck off the stage!" And it wasn't to be mean. It was to teach you that sometimes you could lose an audience. Right. And, go back, revisit that piece, and then know where you lost the audience and bounce back from it. Right. I've been boo-belled quite a few times. Fable, I think he has the record for the most of getting boo-belled. And then we also had the Bell of Justice for the River Dolphins. And this one was hanging right behind the stage where Fable, myself, and Gleason sat. And when somebody hit that one, that means you really hated what they said, right? But it always opened up for discussion at the end, right? You can always be like, "Yo, man, so what was going on?" And be like, "Oh, this is what happened. This is where you could work on." Sometimes people were very, very butthurt, but it was always awesome when an artist bounced back and they got their revenge. And then there was the that swell rule, and it's just like, the artist on stage needs to know feedback, right? Tell them what's going on. Let them hear the snaps and the claps and the yells and the joys. And it's like reiterating the first rule, because they're pretty much similar, the same, but it's just like reiterating it. And then the fourth rule was the tell rule, man. Like, the only way this show is going to grow is for you to tell people, invite people, and there was a lot of beauty in that. Like, when you told a friend, you'd be like, "Yo, I brought 3 people," and then we'd be like, "Yo, man, here's a shot." And then some people like, "Yo, I didn't drink, man. You think I can get like an appetizer?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, it's about the same, and I still get the discount on that. So yeah, let's just do it," right? So I worked at Stella's as well as I was the host of the show, and it was a lot of beauty in that. And oh man, there's so many wonderful moments of the Drunken Retort, right? And it was such a learning experience as far as business, entertainment, and then community, right? We always had a section of asking the community before we started the show, like, what's going on, what's new, does anybody have any announcements, any events? What is going on in our community? And we always had our finger on the pulse of the community through such endeavors. We also invited people to other open mics during our show, right? We were like, "Yo, man, check out the host, Antonio Tone Taylor. He's here. He has a show every Wednesday night at Easttown Hookah Lounge. Yo, come check out Erica Kid Kane Thompson. They have a show at Creston Vibes. I think that one was every Tuesday night." So we were always plugging each other. And it only makes sense that our relationship is still what it is today, because we've shared so many stages together throughout these years. And, it makes me smile just thinking about it. Oh man. So we were at the Easttown Hookah Lounge, and, we were showing up pretty regularly. We would get there, we'd help ZZ set up the show, and then we'd go to Mulligan's, have a couple beverages, and then go back and get ready to perform the show. Ahmad and Brent Hermes, they were the owners of the Hookah Lounge, and friends for years. After one night, man, like, I think all of us were just hanging after the bar, and we were like, "Yo, like, we should really make a run for Art Prize." And, we had never seen like a live performance portion of Art Prize. And we were like, "Yo, man, well, our approach should have meaning." And we were like, "Well, who is an Art Prize reaching?" And then we looked up the information, man, and like, we found out that West Michigan has a large deaf and blind population. And then, there's a whole school for it at Western Michigan University. And then Michigan State University has a whole department where they create Braille for books, and they spread that out throughout the U.S. And there's all these components that were there that nobody would know unless you did research. And, we made that run. And then I remember there was a school that came specifically to come check out Art Prize. And it was wild to see a little girl go up. I can't even remember her name, but I know that poet Mitch Burns, he got her name tattooed on his finger, and I think it's Jules, but I'm not certainly 100% on that. But it was one of those things that affected you long term, right? To see somebody come and then realize that there was art for them there too, and one of the portions of it, we had these walls, and on these walls, there was pictures of us and our family, things that brought us joy, and we described each of them, and then we had it in Braille so somebody can go up and like understand what they were feeling. It was like us describing the pictures, and like it was loud and bright, and we used all these words, and then we had our poems written in Braille so people could come and then feel the poetry. And then if you looked up on stage, you could see an interpreter. And then we also had closed caption. And then we performed multiple times a day at the Bob and in Dr. Grin's. And so we just created history. And that history is our starting point, and like it's not our ending point. Like our ending, we have no idea what's going to happen. We always say that we are flying the plane and building it at the same time, and that's what the Diatribe is, because like we're just growing. Like we're at a point right now where we're even contemplating changing our mission statement, because we're doing more than teaching the youth. We are now teaching our community, and we're learning from our community and making sure that we add to our community. And man, it's just been absolutely exciting, this ride. Because I'm sitting here right now telling an oral history of poetry in Grand Rapids, and I'm a part of it. I laugh every single day, especially like fifth grade. Fifth grade, oh my God, man. They have no filter whatsoever. Fifth grade. Right now we're at Discovery Elementary, and the comedy that comes out from these kids, it gives you life. You never knew you needed it until you experience it. I just remember like one of the exercises I'm doing. I talk to the kids, and I'm telling them to describe walking into their grandmother's house. And I remember one girl was like, I said, what's the first thing you see when you walk into your grandmother's house? And she said, a body, because she dead. And like I had no response to that. And I'm just like, oh, okay, let's do a different exercise. All right. Like maybe like what's the first thing you see at the candy store, right? But you working with kids keeps you on your toes. And I recommend it for everybody. If you really want to find out what you were like or who you are, you need to work with kids. You can find out your patience level, and then you can find out what areas of yourself that you need to work on. Man, working with kids and being in schools is eye-opening, right? It was. I wish I had this when I was younger. And I think that's where we come from, this place. My favorite story is I always talk about, I'm going to mention their name because they're going to be a great poet, Brianna Darren. We met them at Rocket Learning Lounge, where Rick Jackson had invited us after Art Prize to start coming into schools for like career day. And he's like, yo, man, I think kids just need to see that not everybody is blue collar. Not everybody's going to be a doctor. I always tell people, I'm like, yo, they're like, oh man, I want to do this. I want to help people. And I'm like, yo, there are so many moving parts of a hospital that all help people. Like, why don't you learn all the jobs, right? Or as many as you can. And, when Rick invited us to come to the school, I think he was doing just that, making sure that these kids had another opportunity to see what was out in the world, right? Representation matters, and you have to see another side in order to learn about the other side. And Brianna Darren, she was the quiet student in class, barely spoke, always had a smile. But when they finally did speak, everybody listened. And this student, she changed the dynamic of Kelloggsville High School. I remember everybody that used to talk would all of a sudden quiet down so that they could hear her share her words, and they would be so profound. And then other students started to speak up, like Elvis. And now these students are starting to learn to become teaching artists, right? And we got Nisi, and they're helping the Diatribe become sustainable, right? We still don't know what we're doing every day, right? Everybody on this whole planet that is rotating in space is winging it. And we need to understand that and try to find some grace in some of the efforts, right? We know a lot of things that don't work, and the fact that we keep doing them hurts even more. But like trying these new approaches with these kids and adding social emotional learning is what I wish we would have had growing up. And seeing the evolution of these students, right? Like, so, Brianna Darren all of a sudden now being that kid that when they spoke, everybody listened. And now she's going to college, and she's like, yo, man, Foster, thank you for always reaching out to me and encouraging me. And I used to love seeing our former students just all of a sudden show up at the Drunken Retort, right? And we would do it to where like the kids could come, but they'd have to be out by a certain time. So like they could come and see the adult nightlife and just be like, they had to come with a parent, and they see this nightlife and see what was going on. So they knew that it didn't end as soon as they graduated from high school. It's like, no, man, life goes on, and you can find your people and your community. And we had a hand in that. It's all I could do is smile and just hope that I can, if not inspire, I hope I can lift you from that dark place anytime. I think that poetry let me know that everybody has a story to tell. I always talk about finding the commonality as opposed to the difference, right? If you find the one thing that you have in common with somebody else, then you can create a whole relationship based off of that, and then you'll find other things. It's like a domino effect, right? Positivity has a domino effect, right? If you are positive all the time, like even when shit is negative, man, you can overcome it, man. Like you just be like, yo, man, it just took me a little bit longer to get past it. And it's power in that, right? The poetry is a lot of power. I recently got to do an interview with Eric Granke, and he said, invent poetry. And poetry, it doesn't cost you anything. And it's so powerful that it can evoke all the emotions out of you, right? Joy, anger. It can teach you about politics. It can teach you about healthcare. It can teach you, about former poets, and like the trail continues. Like poetry is just this infinite, endless thing that we all need in our lives. And, poetry can be anything, right? I just love it. I love meeting new poets. I love meeting old poets. I love I love bad poetry too, right? Like if it brings you joy and it makes you laugh, or somebody blurts out something that was just utterly ridiculous, but it did the job, right? And it evoked an emotional response. And there's that's an amazing capability that it has. And I enjoy it. To be an adult and to be told, get the fuck off the stage, it's uplifting as well as demeaning as well as comical. Because you don't like you learn where you lost the crowd, right? So like Grand Rapids has a large LGBTQ community, and I remember I used the word tranny, right? And rather than just scold, people asked me like, "Oh, what is that?" Because like I was like, "Oh, I thought that was the correct term," and it was like, "No, you use trans, right, as opposed to tranny." I was like, you know what? I never really had to deal with this situation. Why don't you take the time and tell me more, right? And they were like, "You really want to learn this?" I'm like, "Yeah." That way it doesn't happen in the future. And so that Boo Bell was a teachable moment. There's also been times where, like say like we had an erotic night for poetry, right? And sometimes stuff gets funny. And like you have some poems where people be like, "No, man, I don't want to hear no more," and so they just ring the bell because it's like sometimes it's just too much. Not saying that it all the time is too much, but sometimes it's just like funny overload, and they're like, "Man, like you got to get off the stage, man." So being Boo Bell, man, it's not all bad. A learning jab, right? It's like, I mean, you can get better. You could get worse. And what I loved, man, was like people overcoming the Boo Bells, realizing like where they lost people at. Because sometimes like things can get lost in translation. And, I felt like that Boo Bell, man, it forced you to just, man, like if you're gonna come to this room, to this dojo, that's what we used to call the Drunken Retort at Stella's Lounge. You come into this dojo, you got to be prepared, man. There's gonna be a lot of people that want the slots because like we had like 15 to like 20 slots, and we did signups an hour before the show started, and like it would fill up. You'd have people like shooting you Facebook messages or text messages just trying to get on that list. And, sometimes you hoped for somebody else to get a Boo Bell so you got some time to perform. And so it was different, man. And I'm so glad we got it. I also want to say shout out to my homie, Kermit Harris, because he had the Gong Show at the Gong Show karaoke at Stella's. And I was like, "Yo, man, we're going to do bells." And he was like, "Yo, man, that sounds good." But on the anniversary shows, we would use the giant gong in the front. So like we would be in the back room, which was the former viceroy of Stella's. And then when on the anniversary shows, we'd bring it out to the front room and take over the whole bar. And then other people would have the other side just to go and get food. But our anniversary shows would be packed. There would be hundreds of people to listen to poetry at Stella's Lounge. And our capacity was like, it was exceeded a lot, but it was a lot of fun. AutoPilot. My other best friend, his name is DeAndre Evans. Hilarious guy. Looks like Bernie Mac. I'm glad I'm saying this on a documentary so he knows. He says that he coined the phrase autopilot after drinking, and I took it because of or I don't know. I just absorbed the name because like I used to rap a lot and like freestyle, and I would just keep going. Also, when I was intoxicated, they said that when I was sleeping, I kept moving, like even blackout or whatever. Like I was just in party mode, or I would just keep going. And when they thought I was asleep, if Jeopardy was on, I'd still be answering questions. So they called me Autopilot. So Foster, aka Autopilot. That's how it came about. That is in the world now. Man, the power of poetry, man. I've seen it all, right? I don't have a lot of poetry influences, right? There was Langston Hughes, there was Maya Angelou, but for me, there was writers like James Baldwin. I felt like everything that this man said was poetry. Martin Luther King. A lot of times people misquote Martin Luther King, and I just feel like, Letters from a Birmingham Jail was poetry when he talked about the white Christian moderate. I loved Malcolm X, and I learned that Malcolm X and James Baldwin went to Oxford, and and spoke with such vigor and intelligence that it was undeniable. You know, I say a lot, and Malcolm X did not. He was flawless with his speech. James Baldwin was always prepared and ready, and just to see that, there's a poet named Christopher Michael that is down in Texas, man. Hootie hoo! That's like one of his taglines. And this gentleman, I remember one time he was our feature at the Drunken Retort. And you want to talk about the power of poetry? He gave a challenge to anybody in the crowd to make a suggestion of a poem. And somebody yelled out Alzheimer's, and he got so hyped. Right, his son was with him. His name's Chris Crown Brown. And he got so pumped because like he was prepared for this moment, and he did this poem about Alzheimer's. And I remember the guy heard the poem, and he walked out and he went to the ATM, and he came back and he threw like $400 or $600 into the pass the hat because that was the poem that he needed to hear at that moment in time. I've seen kids go from quiet kids in school to the guest speaker at their high school graduation. I've seen kids get standing ovations and burst out of their shell and become born anew. I've seen people come out of the closet. I've seen people finally talk to their parents. I've seen so much through poetry that it is remarkable. I've actually made my mother and sister cry because they didn't realize that while we were experiencing all these difficulties in life, that I never spoke about the ones that I was facing. And when I finally did, their response was like, "Wow, I never knew that." And then that created a more open relationship between us. And like, I am extremely close with my mother and my sister now, and my family. And I remember, my family had known that I was doing poetry for a while. And when my grandmother passed, Sammy Lee, I've always been known for being jovial and having these jokes, and like I love to be uplifting and make sure that everybody's having a good time. I love to listen because sometimes I might be the only one. And I remember when my grandmother died, I had a poem all ready to go, but my family didn't need me to tell a poem, so I told a joke instead. And that joke started with one side of our family, and then it went through the pews of the church over here. And then next thing I know, I see my cousins on the other side. They're like, "Oh my God, what did he say?" Right? And then all of a sudden the joke went around the whole church, and everybody. And then the preacher got up there and he's like, "Oh, I see that when Sammy passes, it's a good time in here, right?" Or he was trying to be like, he thought that he was the reason for the joy, or he saw the joy that was happening. And, he was like, "Yo, it's that spirit." And it's just like, poetry, even when you have it and you don't use it, it's still in you, and you can still share it through other means. And I think that's one of the powers of poetry. I always say that writing is very therapeutic. It's not therapy by any means, but it's very therapeutic. And writing and poetry it's a mirror, right? If you want to know how you're doing in life, why don't you pick up a pen and a piece of paper, put the date on there, put the time on there, look back at it an hour later, see if you're still feeling the same, look back at it the next day, see your growth, look at it a year from now, see if you're still in the same place, or if you've made it out, if you've made any changes, man. Like, you can see a timeline, man. Like, every day you pick up an ink pen. Every day you type into your phone, it literally has notes, right? And what I like to do is I like to look at the first time I wrote something, right? And the time that I had done. that it was finished. And then if I go back, I'd like to put that other date in there and just be like, yo, man, this is how I was feeling then. This is how I was feeling then. And this is how I'm feeling now. Like if you asked me to talk about something, and it's a beautiful thing seeing the evolution of yourself, right? Looking at this mural, this mirror, this portal, like all the capabilities that writing and poetry have is phenomenal. It's life changing. It's life altering, and I think you have to be open to it as well. And that's one thing that writing does, man. I always tell people, I don't always, because I kind of just came up with it this year, but I was like, yo, the right book could change your life. What if it's the one you wrote? And I think that it has a lot of power in it. When I first seen Art Prize, right, you look around, you see these giant spectacles, and I still don't understand how a quilt won. Because you think that's almost like a boring medium, but then all of a sudden you have respect for it, right? Because like there's a lot of love that goes into a quilt, right? And so when you put on a live performance piece such as like the poetry, and like you have the capability for somebody where Art Prize didn't mean shit to them. And then all of a sudden they go and they can experience it. And it's like, it's like a whole new world. It's like, I could imagine like some kid going and be like, I went to this place and all I could do was feel words, and I felt love, and I felt the describing of these pictures. Like, even though they couldn't see it, I could only imagine what they were imagining. And it gives me great pleasure knowing that I had a hand in something so small to me, but it might have opened up a whole new world for them. And man, just that thought, it brings me joy. Like I get a lot of joy out of a lot of things, man. That's why I love meeting new people, seeing new people. I have this little beautiful baby girl right now, and she is learning every day. I have a hand in that. And it's wild, the things that I get a chance to teach her and show her. And I think of that every time I get to share a poem. It's like, I'm taking the time to share a portion of me and how I think. Like, check it out. And like, if you judge it, that's fine. If you don't, enjoy it. But like, let's see where we can go together. And that's beautiful. I love saying that word, apparently. Beautiful. It's glamorizing, right? And it's just this capability, right? I think that's one of my powers, is the ability to bring people together. And I've loved being able to do that in this city. I've seen poetry and community change Grand Rapids. I've seen people line up for shows, for open mics in this city. I've seen sold out shows, man. I've seen a poetry festival that I've had a hand in. I've seen restaurants put up trans visibility flags and LGBTQ flags and Black Lives Matter signs, and have a drawing, a stencil drawing of me on windows. I've seen my name on the marquee. And that's what poetry has been able to do, is help me to live loud, as my friend Lisa Downing would say. Like, poetry in the bar, man, like literally nightlife, entertainment, man. When I got to this city, man, I always love parties. Bringing people together, man. Like, if you ask anybody from my high school, you could even go to my elementary. I don't burn bridges. I like to, you never know when, you don't have to burn a bridge because you never know when you need to cross that bridge again, right? You never know who will answer that Batman signal, right? When you throw that up in the air, man, and like you've lived a life of friendship, and then people will always return that friendship. Poetry has had a large hand in that. Music has had a large hand in that. Working at bars and just meeting people and listening has had a hand in that. I grew up in the church, but I also left the church, right? I remember people saying to love one another, but then somebody was homosexual, and it's like, yo, why do you care about their bedroom that you are not in? Like, I still to this day I don't understand that. My little girl, her name is Josie Simone Foster. My grandfather, his name was Joseph. Growing up, his nickname was Josie. I have a cousin, her name is Simone. She came out to my family, and my grandfather didn't show up to her wedding, and he said, I don't agree with that lifestyle. I think it's better for me not to be there, but she's still my granddaughter. I can respect that, but the fact that he said it, but I don't have to agree with it. I also had my Uncle Rod. I love this dude, preacher, and he wouldn't perform the ceremony for my cousin. So you know what I did? I got ordained to do so. So I remember my uncle saying that he wouldn't perform the ceremony because he didn't believe in that, right? In her lifestyle. And I've always been told that it's family over everything. So I took my teachings of coming up and the love of everything, because like love is the only thing that's going to get us through anything. It's possible. And I became ordained, and I started doing weddings. And my cousin didn't need me to perform the wedding. They found somebody else, but I made sure that I was there for my family. And I think that's one of the things. Poetry is a great teacher every time. Like I'm emotional. I'm not deadpan. Like I'll be able to relate to anything that you say eventually with time. If you take the time, I will take the time. And like I've been grateful that I've had that capability. I have a friend, Jacqueline Gennaro, and a long time ago, she told me there's a reason and a season for each person that you meet. And I think that's the same thing for poems or writings, excuse me, or quotes. I mean, like when you're in the checkout aisle of a grocery store and you see an article and all of a sudden it captures your eye, right? There's a reason that you buy it, right? It stands out to you, and maybe it was meant for you. And I feel like sometimes there's poems that you need to hear. There's people that you need to meet. Sometimes it's that sixth sense, right? Where you're not really paying attention, and all of a sudden you stop, and then you see the most wild fucking accident ever in your life, right? There's something in this universe, in this world, that grabs your attention, and you need it at that particular moment. And it's undeniable, right? That's kind of like gravity. There's a reason that it brings you back down to earth at this particular point in time, is because like maybe you aren't ready to be tethered, or I'm sorry, untethered from this world. And sometimes that's that thing that you need at that moment that you need it. Yeah, we created the grand showcase, man. I have been able to do so many things, man, and it's because of my friends, right, and my friendship, right. So I mentioned like the original Back to the 90s party. With that, I just asked my friends if they wanted to throw a 90s party with me. And the first date we got was like a Thursday. And I got 200 plus people on a Thursday. And this establishment was like, yo, I didn't know you could do that. It was the Pyramid Scheme. Shout out to them, Jeff and Tammy Vandenberg. And I remember I offered the Drunken Retort to them. And Jeff told me he wanted the front bar just to be a bar. They now host other shows and stuff in the front bar. But I mean, like, I gave them the opportunity to get the Drunken Retort. And then I remember Lindsay Fussman, shout out to her. She used to come over to the Pyramid Scheme when I was working there. And she asked about, she was like, yo, I need to find an idea for a show, da, da, da. And I was like, yo, I'm actually already ready. I have an idea for a show. I want to call it the Drunken Retort. And I gave her like all this, and I wrote down like this whole proposal, and she gave it to Mark Sellers. And as soon as they said yes, I took that piece of paper, crumbled it up, and I got Marcel, and I'm like, yo, let's create a show. And we were able to do that. But could you re-ask that question again? Because I kind of went like, I'm trying to figure out this whole timeline of everything. What was that question one more time? Oh, the Grand Showcase. And so, you know, the Grand Showcase, it was Fable, Gleason, and I sitting there, and we're like, yo, man, we need to create something where we get like a large act, and we need to make sure that the local poets share the stage with some of our friends that we met throughout Michigan in the Midwest, as well as bring in a national artist. And we reached out to Fountain Street Church because Fable had met Jack Waller, and I just remember Jack was like, well, why don't you just use this space? And like, we'll figure it out, right? Because like when you want to do something and the universe knows that it's needed, like shit happens, right? Like like the right people can always come together to make a dream come true, right? Sometimes, man, I even have to tell myself, like, man, are you dreaming big enough, man? And so like that's how the Grand Showcase came. And Fable and Gleason, man, they put in so much work. I was working a bunch of different jobs, but the one thing that I've always relied on was being able to find time for my friends. And so whenever they, had something that they needed me to do, I'm like, all right, man, I can do that. Or if I couldn't do it, I'm like, yo, man, you got to pick something else, man. That's not my strong suit. Like, let's do that. But, we were able to do the Grand Showcase. And then one of the things that I added for the Grand Showcase was the Q&A with the artists, and to see people get to talk to their favorite artists afterwards, like to see them light up and then take pictures with them. That's a life-changing moment, because like it's somebody that you thought was so far away. They're in the same realm as you, and you guys share the same things, right? Because this person shared such an intimate moment or portion of their lives with you, and you can definitely relate because you've gone through the same thing. And to have that same camaraderie, oh man, it takes you from whatever dark place you were in or possibly about to turn to, and it changes your direction. And I think that's what the Grand Showcase was, right? We gave kids the opportunity to see poetry in their city, and it's so, it's so grassroots. I still to this day don't know the end goal of the Diatribe. Right? Like if there's like, what are we going to do, man? Are we going to retire and pass the torch? Or like, what is like, we always talk about the idea of making something that will outlive you. And there's love in that. Like that's a gift to the world. And like, I hope that one of the things that I create will be a gift to this world. I talk about my family a lot, and I talk about grief. When I was experiencing some form of success traveling throughout the Midwest with music, I was losing my family members. In the span of a couple of years, I lost like 2 grandmothers, grandfather, aunts, uncles, cousins, and then the nail on the head was losing my father. That was in 2015 where I lost my father. And I remember writing the poem that my family needed to hear, and it was called No Children's Book. And I will read that one. I'm over here on this chair being vulnerable and shit and crying. Oh man. So let's see.
Poetry does that. Poetry does that.
It does, man. But this is a piece. It's called Children's Book, and this is the one that made my mother realize that I was a writer, and yeah. No children's book has ever started off when Dad got sick that I can think of. Not the Berenstain Bears, Goosebumps, Highlights for Children, Tiki Tiki Timbo, No Sarimbo, Charibar Rucci, Pip Perry Pimbo, nothing. In fact, that book didn't have a father, only the old man, but see, I had a father. He was strong and black, a husband, a brother, a cousin, a friend, an uncle, a neighbor, a provider, a protector, a hustler, a godfather, and a listener. He was also a diabetic dealing with pills and strokes, defibrillators, heart attacks, depression, anger, sadness, cigarettes, low potassium, leg cramps, surgeries. He had a bad equilibrium like a broken seesaw, waterway issues and amputation. And here I am reflecting back on my kid-friendly education instead of how my life changed because my father's did. So let me write a real version of my book on life. I can't draw, but picture this as the beginning. I knew something was wrong when my mother answered the phone, tired as she always is, half sleep, half drowsy, but awake enough to make sure my sister and I didn't set the house on fire while cooking dinner. "Hello," she said, followed by her legs giving out like kicking a chair from underneath you, slumping into her favorite napping place, breathless, in shock, whispering, "Oh God, no, I'm leaving now. It's hard to hear your mother say, 'Help me up, crutch.' I mean, son." No children's book ever started off when my father was misdiagnosed for cerebral palsy instead of stroke. No book ever started off when my father's cane turned into a walker and then into rolling circular legs. No book ever started off with when my father could no longer take the stairs to see me perform. No book ever started off with when I had to change my father's diaper or how many different ways I could show him how to tie a tie now. See, no book ever started off with, "Why is my father's face sagging?" And no book would tell you how I used Bazooka Joe bubblegum to strengthen my father's jaw muscles into a smile, into the words, "I love you, I'm okay," into doctors, "Wow, you're improving rapidly." See, I don't know the book that would tell you that from 1497 Burton Road in Muskegon, Michigan, to 100 Michigan Street Northeast in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that 1,929 seconds is the time that it takes to stop dinner, get in a car, and race to Butterworth Hospital. 1929 is also significant because it was the start of my family's depression and economic hardships and how we battled to stay afloat. And no children's book would ever tell you how your hands will continue to tremble when you hold needle-like objects like a pen, your passion, your escape, and how you'll flash back to the last morphine shot you gave your father while you're holding his hands as he passed, looking into your eyes as the defibrillator constantly electrocutes his failing heart. Beep. No children's book ever shared such intimate, devastating memories like P, beep, T, beep, S, beep, D, beep. But I will always love and remember my father reading them, no matter how much they didn't prepare me. Beep, I love you, beep, goodbye, beep, flatline. And so sometimes there's a poem that everybody needs to hear. And I felt like that one was for me, expressing what it was like to lose my father. Man, I'm just happy to still be here. I'm happy to I'm happy with the people that I met, right? I met you, Justin, Greg Bliss, Azizi Jasper, Fable, Gleason, Vincent Dix. He likes poetry. Poetry's good. That's what he said in the interview once. You know, I got that memory. You know, I'm happy to see what poetry is turning into. And it's a voice for the voiceless. And that's what one of the things that the Diatribe has done, man. Like, even the people that believe in us, from our board, to supporters, people that have come to shows, man, it is an absolute blessing that poetry has given me.